Ofer Lealofa. Where is love? On Tuesday, 10th of April 2018, the Samoan Observer published an open letter addressed to me by Fa'apale Taumia. His letter moved me deeply, and this is my response. On returning to Samoa from University of Auckland, Pacific Law, Custom and Constitutionalism conference held February 12th to 14th, I have been reading with great interest our current public debates on Samoan customary law, land and land laws. Fa'apale is right, Samoa is now at a significant crossroad in her governing history. Not just in terms of trying to figure out how best to protect our customary land from foreign or alien interests, but also how to protect ourselves from ourselves. I will explain what I mean further on. Suffice to say for now that this is the most dangerous issue facing us since our fight for the return of our independence. Since Samoa regained independence, we have taken our Samoa for granted. We as leaders have assumed that so long as we have governing control over ourselves, Samoa, Mo Samoa, we will never lose it. But the loss of culture and core values happens slowly, subtly, and stealthily, and on our own watch. Today it has become clear that we can no longer escape the reality that as leaders we must take a public stand against allowing the ambiguity of Article 102 of our Constitution to persist. We must admit that in the light of the accumulating evidence, some of which I will speak to shortly, this ambiguity has been exploited in ways that now seriously undermine the integrity and purpose of Article 102, i.e. to protect customary lands from alienation. Today I make a plea that as a nation whose Fa'asinomanga identity and tofi inheritance are inextricably connected to our customary lands, that we stand together and demand that this ambiguity be properly attended to, and that allowing this, the article be according, and following this, the article be accordingly amended. This is our right. It is our right as Suli, heirs of all customary lands in Samoa, whether you live in Samoa or not. The preamble of our Constitution talks unashamedly about love. It says that God is an ever-loving God, and that his love, or alofa, is everlasting. In drafting our Constitution, the supreme law of our land, our forebears recognized they must preserve what makes us unique as a people. They wrote that Samoa is a country founded on God, a country where only God has absolute sovereignty over everything, and a country where we, as a people, have authority over our Samoan heritage, our Du, Ma'anga, Samoa, and that this heritage is a sacred heritage. A tofi, tufasolo, paia tufasolo. Heritage that is to be passed on from one generation to the next forever. Our Du Manganu Samoa tells us that we are of the land and the land is of us. The ritual bearing of a child's puti and a manas whanua in the land is because we believe that we are of the land and the land is of us. Our Fa'asinomanga is nothing without land. Our matai titles have little meaning without land. To be landless in our Fa'asamoa is therefore to belong to nowhere, to live without identity, to have no roots or home. The title of my address is Ofere Alofa, meaning where is love? Where has the principle of Alofa gone? Professor Tony Angelo, a well-respected New Zealand constitutional law specialist in Pacific Law, Custom and Constitutionalism Conference, mentioned earlier, asked in the midst of a heated interchange of views, where is love? Following this, there were giggles and muffled laughter from the audience. For me, however, this question had a profound and lingering impact. I asked someone what the learned professor might have meant by his question, and it was suggested to me that perhaps more than anything else it had to do with the fact that the language of love is no longer part of the language of law. Sadly, even Samoan custom law. Therefore, in asking Ofele Alofa, where has the principle of Alofa gone, I am deliberately drawing our attention to the fact that the language and spirit of our laws today have taken us far away from the original source of inspiration, the Tu Manga Nu Samoa, wherein love is a given, that we are now in the position of having to re-educate and restore its logic, mana, and integrity in our laws. And we do this not because we have the pule or authority as Samoans to do so, but because we have a deep and everlasting love or alofa as Samoans for our nation, our village, our families, our individual selves, and our Samoa. This is where the principle of alofa resides and finds meaning. Let us turn to the ambiguity at issue here in Article 102 of the Constitution. The ambiguity lies in how best to read the relationship between the wording of the main body of the article and the wording of its two subsections and subclauses, particularly by the first. Let me cite the article. Article 102, no alienation of customary land. It shall not be lawful or competent for any person to make any alienation or disposition of customary land or any interest in customary land, whether by way of sale, mortgage, or otherwise howsoever, nor shall customary land or any interest therein be capable of being taken in execution or be assets for the payment of the debts of any person on his decease or insolvency, provided that an act of parliament may authorize A, the granting of a lease or license of any customary land or any interest therein, the taking of any customary land or any interest therein for public purposes. The purpose of Article 102 is clearly expressed by title, no alienation of customary lands. The rest of the article is, however, less clear, for i.e. there is ambiguity within, in layman's terms, In layman's terms, the article says that it is illegal to alienate customary land unless an act of parliament allows for a lease, one, or license to be granted over customary, or two, customary land is to be taken for public purpose. I do not have any problems with the taking of customary land for public purposes, assuming, of course, that such public purposes are indeed valid public purposes. What I have a problem with is the ambiguity that arises as a result of reading the subclause that states that an act of parliament may authorize the granting of a lease or license of any customary land or any interest therein, alongside the wording of the main text of the article which says no alienation of customary land, whether by way of sale, mortgage, or otherwise howsoever. This subclause A also makes no specific mention of mortgaging a leasehold interest. To read this within the words of any interest therein would seem to run against the plain meaning of the words of the main body of the article, which explicitly prohibits against mortgages. Therein lies our ambiguity. Our constitutional forebears put their faith in us to make just decisions, moving forward in relation to protecting our customary lands. Decisions that would progress us as nations, whereby we would not only stand proud alongside other nations in our ability to be economically viable in terms of our needs, but also in the knowledge that we did not sell our souls, our sacred heritage, our tofi pa'iatu fasolo in the process. The provisions of the Lands and Titles Registration Act 2008, LTRA, have raised significant doubt and controversy to meet the constitutional promise of protecting customary land against alienation. So too has the reasoning offered by government for the alienation of customary land till 2017, ACALAB. I make reference here to Section 25 of the LTRA in particular as evidence of how law is being used to erode our rights as Suli on the one hand, and to subsection 112 of the explanatory memorandum of the ACLAB as evidence of how the ambiguity of Article 102 is being negatively exploited to pass legislation that would legalize the mortgaging of customary land, even if it is only in terms of the mortgaging of leasehold interest on the other. The subsection of Section 25 of the LTR that I want to highlight is subsection 4. It relates to the provision of what it calls a certificate of correctness. I am told that this certificate is only relevant to the registration of freehold land, and that there is no process for the registration of leasehold or licensed interest over customary land. This other process is that by law, the owners of customary land must file an application to grant a lease of customary land with the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment, MNRE, for approval. If approved, the MLE would then draw up the lease or license, and then the minister signs the lease as trustee for the customary land. Here the owners, I am told, is not meant to actually sign the lease or license. However, there is evidence to the contrary. Leaving aside the issue of multiple owners and the proposed pule fasa'o for the moment, as the problematic of this has been well argued in public debate today, Section 25 is of interest to me insofar as it raises two pertinent questions. Why have we vested such power in one person, even if he's a minister, over our customary lands? And why is there not a similarly transparent standard of correctness required of registration of interests over customary land, as seems the case for freehold land? The imperative to finding answers to these questions lies in the need of Suli to gain trust in these laws and the protection mechanisms they purport to give to ensuring that our customary lands are not unlawfully alienated. In Samoan custom law, both Panganu'u and Nangaiwhanua, the only person that has any rights over customary land is a Suli. Suli retain their Suli rights forever. Once a Suli, always a Suli. Does not matter whether they reside in inside or outside somewhere. In other words, a Suli does not lose his or her Suli status if they decide to live outside Samoa. In the custom law of Alpha Samoa, this is a given. It is fundamental to being a Suli. Any imposition by the state, however well-meaning, or on our rights as Suli is breach of our Tūmanganu protected by the Constitution. In terms of the legalization of mortgaging of leasehold interest over customary land as is promoted by the subsection 112 of the explanatory memorandum in the ACLAB, this is both negatively exploitative and dangerous. It negatively exploits the ambiguity discussed already in Article 102 and creates a dangerous platform by which the effective alienation of customary land can be enabled. This in itself also runs contrary to the primary purpose of Article 102, i.e. no alienation of customary land. The Sasina Village Council's recent decision to lease customary lands to foreign investors for 100 years for a sum of $250,000 per year, for example, means that they could unwittingly open the doors to their customary lands being subjected to mortgagor interest, should their tenant decide to mortgage their leasehold interest, as per LAB. This potential for mortgaging of leasehold interest opens the door further to other potential foreigners imposing their interest on Sasina land for at least 100 years, thus potentially putting access to Sasina land out of reach at least 3 generations of current and future Suli of Sasina should they want to access it. The question arises, who has the right to take this access away from Suli of Sasina lands at issue, and for such a period? 100 years is a long time. With the speed at which fundamental changes to Samoa have occurred over the last 30 years, it is not hard to imagine what could happen in 100 years if we were to continue on this type of lawmaking path. The seriously negative implications that these scenarios have presented have given rise to Fa'apale and others call for serious national leadership attention and action. I hear your call. In 2008, as head of state, I was assured by the Attorney General that the provisions of the LTR bill would not impact in any way on the customary land rights of Sulu. The Attorney General and her office is tasked with a sacred duty to provide the head of state with the best legal advice possible. Parliament is tasked with a similar sacred duty to consider the full implications of all the bills that come before it. The Prime Minister is also tasked with the same sacred duty. He must ensure that by the third reading and before the bill is passed officially into law, when he advises the head of state to give his assent so that the bill can become law, that he has properly considered the full implications of the said bill on the people. Our Constitution states that where all this has properly occurred, and the Prime Minister does in fact advise the head of state to give his assent, the head of state must give his assent. That is the process and protocol for lawmaking set down for us by our constitutional forebears. It is, as Fa'apale writes, a process and protocol that assumes that our leaders are capable of fulfilling their sacred duties, and they have the skills and support to do so. And they do so with alofa demanded of them by our forefathers. The checks and balances on the power and proper work of the state is not operating well. They need to be fixed. Today we have no chance but to admit that there is something not operating well here, and that we collectively have an obligation to identify and fix it. Today we have the responsibility of admitting that there is a problem with Article 102, that the ambiguity within it is serious enough to warrant the attention of our best minds in order to make Article 102 unambiguous. These minds, however, must be able to locate the principle of alofa in their custom law and statutory law assessments, and have it sing in harmony alongside their assessments of public and of legal certainty and transparency. These minds must come up with ways to fix the ambiguity, whereby the process for fixing it is as much about strengthening people and culture as it is about strengthening the law. And these minds will have to advise the country on how best to frame the amendment, so that when the proposed amendment is put to public referendum, as per Article 109 of the Constitution, that the country would be well equipped to make the right decision in accordance with their conscience. We as a nation have a sacred duty to find these minds and to support them by putting our personal and political biases aside, so that we can work together as one people to achieve the balance and protection desired by our constitutional forebears in Article 102. The balance between gaining economic and environmental sustainability for all families and villages, and retaining the cultural integrity of our true Malanu Samoa, and the protection of our customary lands against undue alienation. In the last 30 years, there has been a paradigm shift. We have moved from a Samoa where Pule and Alofa coexisted in relative harmony to one where Pule now seems to rule alone. In this new paradigm, we see the introduction of laws where instead of the Pule of the South being dependent on the love and support of the Hawaii, supporting family and village members, the Sao is capable of existing and exercising Pule quite independently from it. In the Samoa, this is wrong. It is repugnant to everything that the Samoa stands for. The Whaamatai exists and draws meaning and value from a reciprocal love and respect between Matai and Hawaii, family members. Even for Tamaiga, this is true. When Samoa was fighting for the return of our independence during the Mau, the leadership of Tamaiga would not have amounted to anything had it not been for the reciprocal love, respect, and support they shared with all those in the Hawaii who rallied behind and alongside them. During that fateful Black Saturday when he heard gunfire and was told where it was coming from and of the wounded, Tupua Tamasese did not hesitate to make his stance against colonial administrative tyranny. Knowing full well that he may get shot if he walked towards the gunfire, he went along with fellow leaders anyway. Theirs was an act of leadership, of ultimate service and sacrifice. It was an act of love and protection, protection of land, family, and the dignity of Samoa. This reciprocity of love is what fuels us to go beyond the call of duty, to sacrifice our comforts for the greater good. This kind of reciprocal love is what motivates parents to care for their children, notwithstanding. It is what motivates children to care for their parents, no matter what. It is what motivates families and villages to care for their members. It is what makes members of our nation proud to be part of this nation. There is a saying in Leulumoenga, o le matua o Leulumoenga ele se matua whawhangai whali, o le matua e ngā sese, meaning the leaders of Leulumoenga, that is a Tumua, are not leaders by virtue of status. They are leaders by virtue of the love and selfless service they give to their people and receive in return. To emphasize Pule without Alofa is to strip Pule of what will ensure its longevity. In other words, if Matai exercises his or her Pule without Alofa, their Pule would be short-lived. Let me return to my question of fair Alofa. Where is love? Where has the principle of Alofa gone? In this new paradigm, we ourselves have stripped ourselves of the power of the most fundamental principle to protect us against our own arrogance and greed. When we stand by and further and follow the sword, when there is time aside and watch the passing of legislative enactments that undermine or make Alofa irrelevant in law, we are complicit in that act of colonial disempowerment. Here, the colonial knave, the neo-colonial master, is not an outsider forcing us to do something against our will. He is within us, moving among us, preying on our vulnerabilities, luring us to believe that there is only no other option for economic development but the alienation of customary land. Our forebears knew this would happen. That's why they made Article 102 and 109 such a significant part of the Constitution. We know from current private sector agriculture and practice that this is not the only options. We know that with the right state support, it is possible for local businesses to set up profitable partnerships with villages and families, to develop their external markets. In knowing this, our constitutional forebears are challenging us to rise to the occasion, to do all we can to protect ourselves from ourselves, to protect ourselves from unnecessarily alienating our customary land, whether actual or constructive, the lands they fought so hard to protect, To do this, we must remember and revive in our custom laws, our dumangalu, our languaging and practices, the importance of alofa, of their alofa. I end with a story from Satawa. Yeah, well, I've said it in Samoan, and it's a bit long. But okay, I'll go to the end. We have faced many challenges, this is the last few paragraphs, as a nation since regaining independence, but this is the most serious. To overcome this challenge, we must first recognize that the challenge now comes from outside, but it does not come from outside but within. We must recognize that like Joshua and the Israelites, the only way to cross the river as a nation with our souls intact is to find understanding in this wisdom of our forebears and their trust in God. In Joshua 4:2-7, the Lord said to Joshua, choose 12 men from among the people, one from each tribe, and tell them to take up 12 stones from the middle of the Jordan, from right where the priests are standing, and carry them over with you, and put them down at the place where you stay tonight. So Joshua called together the 12 men he had appointed from the Israelites, one from each tribe, and said to them, go over before the ark of the Lord your God in the middle of Jordan. Each of you is to take up a stone on his shoulder, according to the number of the tribes of Israelites, to serve as a sign among you. In the future, when your children ask you, what do these stones mean? Tell them that the flow of the Jordan was cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. When it crossed the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. These stones are to be memorial to the people of Israel forever. Our stand against the unconstitutionality of any act of parliament that seeks to undermine Article 102 and for the need to make our constitution unambiguous and free from negative exploitation are our memorial story. In the river crossing exercise we are now facing, despite the heavy weight of these stones, we must carry and place them firmly in the river so that they will stand the test of time and the force of changing currents, so that when future Suli ask Ophelia Alofa, where is love? Where is the principle of love in what we did? We can proudly say, there it is, so true.